Welcome to the Whole Church Podcast.
Your favorite church unity podcast.
Probably.
If you want to hear from pastors,
Professors.
and everything in between,
Right, sure.
and, the occasional train talk.
Right, yeah. Have we got the podcast for you?
All right, everybody, welcome to the Whole Church Podcast. Again, I am your co-host, Joshua Noel. I like long walks on the beach and virgin pina coladas. Here today with your other co-host, Tiberius Wan, who enjoys long walks to the other side of the ping pong table where he plays with himself. He's too good to play against anyone else, actually. Yeah. We got a very exciting episode for you guys today. We're going to be talking about some of the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on, as well as other issues of systematic racism. We have a few guests. Mainly, we're going to be talking to Sister Sylvia, and then later in the podcast, we're going to open up a panel with a few of our other guests, which we'll introduce at that time whenever we start that. But before we do, TJ wants to tell you guys ways that you guys can support us, right?
Right. Obviously, it'd be best if you could donate all of your money to us. That would be incredible.
All of it.
But until someone decides to do that, you can support us by following us on our social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Take the Twitter from us. Our current, Twitter guy is really bad at it.
Actually, awful, yeah. And just to clarify, you guys can still support us after someone donates all of their money to us. Yeah. You can still feel free to follow the podcast. We won't stop, because that actually has pretty much nothing to do with why we do this podcast. Because I'm sure we just make a net negative gain per week on this.
Right. And it would help a lot if every time we release an episode, you share it on your social medias. That helps so much.
And of course, if someone wants to be part of the team, we still need help with our regular media, editing audio, getting pictures out for things, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's all. Is that all the needs, CJ?
I think that's it.
Awesome. So I'm actually really excited to kind of jump into what we're going to be talking about. It won't be my cat litter box that you might be hearing right now. But we have some important subjects that we mentioned we're going to be able to talk about here in a minute. We're waiting on Sister Sylvia to join, but while we do, TJ, I have a silly question for you.
Sure.
We do this once a week. This one's not even that silly or hard or anything. Just be quick. If you had 4 penguins, what would you name them?
Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo.
Did you say Michelangelo twice?
Yep.
Alright, so you just wouldn't use Leonardo at all?
No.
He's my favorite.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to feel better than the others,
Except for Michelangelo.
Sure.
Because there's 2 of them. He must be your favorite. Okay, so I was originally going to use Gunther for one of mine from Adventure Time.
Sure.
Originally, I asked this question to my wife just randomly, and Tiffany used Gunther and said I'm not allowed to now, so I'm not allowed to. So that's fun. So my 4 penguins will be Jives, Grumpy, like the dwarf, Bartholomew, the Dark Lord of All from Doctor Who, and then Bob from just Bob's a good name,
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Now we're joined by Sister Sylvia. Sister Sylvia, it's awesome to have you, as always. I don't know if our listeners know this, but we have Sister Sylvia on every 24 episodes. She was on episode 24, and now we're on episode 48. She'll be back for episode 72.
Okay.
And hopefully before then.
Thank you for having me. I am honored to be asked.
The honor is all ours. This is definitely a topic that we couldn't have talked about without you guys' help. So very excited that you're here with us. But yeah, so part of our intro, we always start with a silly question, which you may remember, you may not.
Yeah, I do.
Awesome. Today is I asked TJ what he would name 4 penguins should he have 4 penguins? His
Penguins.
answer, yeah,
Okay.
he answered with Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo again.
Okay. Twins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's the Ninja Turtle name, but without the leader because he doesn't want leaders.
Okay.
Yeah. I answered with let's see, what were mine again? I had Jives, Grumpy, like the dwarf,
Mm-hmm.
Bartholomew, the Dark Lord from Doctor Who, and then Bob. Bob's a good name. Solid name. Yeah. So if you had 4 penguins, Sister Sylvia, what would you name your 4 penguins?
I would name them Zebulon, Antley, Abram, and Abraham.
Nice. And that's
that sounds a little familiar.
Yeah, very familiar. You know, as you get older, you don't want to have to remember anything else, so you keep life simple.
That's why I gave 2 of my penguins the same name.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
My grandpa had a Chihuahua once that he named Jack.
Oh,
and ever since then, if I bring a friend or someone brings someone over, he can't pronounce their name. You just tell them he's going to call them Jack.
Okay.
But we all find hilarious, and because usually they don't know that he had a dog once named Jack.
Gotcha.
Oh, all right. Before we do our panel here coming up, though, we had a couple questions we wanted to just talk to you about.
Okay.
First one is we're talking about the Black Lives Movement, and we're talking about systemic racism in America today, right? Because right now it's a hot topic. A lot's going on. We want to know what we can do and what the church can do. That's kind of the mission of this episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
But first, we wanted to ask, the climate's changed recently, right? About this topic. All of a sudden, this topic's getting a lot more attention than it was.
Yes.
I remember when the Black Panther movie came out, it was, there was a lot of people who were really happy to have the first Black superhero, and I think that's really the last time I heard anything about racism and that sort of topic at all until the last few months. And now it's blown up. What's changed?
Well, one, I've heard Black Lives Matter a whole lot more than that. It is, I want to say, the undercurrent of our lives. It may not have been as front and foremost as it is right now, but in a Black person's life, it is always there. It never, ever goes away. That is the story of our life. And what has changed so much now is I want to think the inhumane ways the last 2 Black men have died. And I think the African Americans have said to themselves, this is enough. This is enough. And I know we have the Vietnam Wall monument with everybody's names on it. We could possibly have a wall with names on it.
All right. So you suggested that we put together a panel to talk about what can be done about these. And we're going to start that soon.
Okay.
But can I ask what made you think a panel was the best way to approach this for us?
Because I think we need to hear different people's perspective, different people's take on the whole situation. Just hearing one person, myself, I don't think should suffice. You even asked, what can the church do or what can America do? And I think one of the main things we could do is come to the table. Let's have a conversation. Let's don't criticize, throw hate, throw mud. These are uncomfortable topics. But we need to come to the table. As difficult as it is, we need to come to the table and we need to have a conversation. That has been the missing link, I think, in everything.
Yeah. And it can be It can be very uncomfortable to talk about.
It's very uncomfortable.
An uncomfortable podcast, but that's we have to have those. That's we say in our theme, but our goal is to see the whole church whole again. Right? That's kind of our mission statement. The whole church can't be whole until every part is whole, right?
That's true.
And that's why we're doing this today. I think it's very important to talk about.
And the whole church can't be whole until the church recognizes that it's not whole. Dr. Phil says you can't fix what you don't admit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is why we have this ongoing canker sore that keeps opening up, because we never tend to the wound. When you have a sore or a burn, and God knows I hope I never get burned, because I've had to pray for too many people who are tragically burned. And if a scab grows, they have to scrape it off. They scrape it off, and it's painful. It's brutal. Why? Because it's not going to heal from the outside in. It's got to be healed from the inside out. The scab has got to be scraped off. And I think George Floyd represents a scab. Oh, it's peaceful for a time, but it's a scab. And then another black man gets brutally killed. And the scab has got to come off again. The looting has got to start. The protest has got to start. And until we allow this sore, this burn, this pussy mess to heal from the inside out, the church will remain broken and the world will remain broken.
Hard truths to face. Hard truths to face.
Yes.
Well, I think that brings us to the point where we're getting ready to start the panel that you suggested.
Okay.
Some of you have known for a very long time. Some of you have met more recently. Some of you I'm just now meeting, but you all hold a special place in my heart, and this conversation is extremely important. And it's extremely important that everybody knows who's talking. Everybody just kind of introduce themselves one at a time.
I'm Pastor Charles. Been a part of the church for quite some time now. It was good to see someone that I actually grew up in the church with on the call. That's Miss Val. Good to see you. Hadn't seen you in years. Sister Staten has been a mentor to me for the past several years. She actually served as my first camp director that I ever experienced. So there's a lot of connections. There's a lot of history. A lot of Pastor Blake, a very good friend of mine, that I have on this call with us. And I'd just like to say to you, Josh, I think this is a very bold and a very brave thing that you guys are doing, because this conversation is long overdue, and it's time that we've had.
Valerie Iseah, grew up in the same small hometown there in South Carolina, was a part of the Church of God of Prophecy practically all of my childhood. However, since that time, and it was during college that I left the Church of God of Prophecy, and it was actually because I experienced racism. And I've been a part of the Baptist Church. I've been a part of the AME Church. I am currently a part of a denomination. Those moves were strictly because geographical moves, but they all really contributed to my growth and my development and who I am today. Not only as a Christian, a woman of God, and a active leader in my church, but who I am as a person, who I am as an employee, who I am as a mother and a wife. So I currently reside in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm CEO of an organization called Autism Charlotte. I am a wife of 25 years, a mother of a handsome 15-year-old. And if you follow me on social media, you know that is my heart and that's my life. And I'm very passionate about this particular issue because I do have that son. And I'm committed to the conversation. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I have a lot of passion around this issue.
So my name is Reverend Keno Cannady, and I am the pastor of Union Bethel AME Zion Church in Cornelius, North Carolina, also known as the historic Smithfield community. It is an honor and privilege to be on this conversation with you all. I met Josh and TJ just off of a random phone call asking about interviewing someone about the church in the AME Zion Church, and we hit it off ever since then. So I thank them for even inviting me on this panel. It's a pleasure to see you all.
My name is Devonte Dixson. I kind of grew up in Kogop with a mix of some Southern Baptist churches as well. But I hold Kogop near and dear to the heart because, that's really where I got to know Jesus. I got a personal relationship with him.
Yes. Thank you I thank my cousin Charles for the invite to sit in on this panel tonight. I serve as pastor in Goldston, North Carolina, of the Destiny Church of God of Prophecy, and I will say, fourth generation Church of God of Prophecy. I've been in the church a long time, and I'm just the privilege to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing this conversation and praying that there will be change. I'm listening to everything everyone else is saying, and I too, have a story, but you know what? Every one of us has a story, but I just appreciate being on this call. I also married 30 years. I celebrated 30 years of marriage on yesterday. So I thank God for that. I have 4 beautiful children, 2 young men, 2 young women that reside in Georgia. They're grown, but I thank God. And, this conversation is needed. It's needed because I have a daughter who is a member of the church, which she would make 5 generations in the Church of God of Prophecy. And we have seen a lot. I've seen a lot in the Church of God of Prophecy when it comes to race and race relationships. So I'm just looking forward to hearing what everyone is going to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Sister Sylvia, we kind of already introduced you here, so
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. How does everyone feel about the Aunt Jemima name change?
Now, who's this talking? Yeah.
That's
This is TJ. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're changing Aunt Jemima's name.
Yeah. And the syrup.
Did you hear the story behind, like, the whole naming and everything?
Yes. Yeah.
No, not like originally.
I don't know what we're talking about at all, actually.
I know, like, the old logo was really bad, but I haven't heard anything since then.
I honestly didn't know the whole story about Aunt Jemima until today when I read the article, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. So it's pretty much a slave story where I'm not sure exactly who the creator was. It's someone that owns Quaker, I believe. But either way, he pretty much has a slave that goes around selling his pancake mix, essentially, just using her as a prop. So
and she's got the head rag on and the slave clothes on.
Right. So he just pretty much used her as a prop and put her faith on a product.
Weird.
So not okay at all.
No.
Yeah. Interesting.
Awesome. We did want to ask all of you, because we don't want to just talk about practical and what's going on in the big world picture. We want to be personal, right? We want to be uncomfortable. And I want to give you guys an opportunity to share your stories. If any of you have ever faced any form of racism or systematic racism or anything like that, and you guys wanted to talk about it, this would be a great time. We're all ears. If anybody has any stories they wanted to share.
One of my stories would be, I was on the board for CDL here in South Carolina. And this was possibly in the mid-'80s. And I traveled to a certain church to teach my class. And as you know, South Carolina is predominantly white. I was the only female and I was the only black person on the committee. I drove about 3 hours to get to this church. My 8th grade son at the time was riding with me, and the pastor refused to let me in his church. He refused to let me in. I go back to my vehicle feeling like a whipped pup, because every time you think this has died down, it rises again. And So I was trying to smooth it over with my son because I didn't want him to know what really happened. And I said to him, they probably don't want to have the class because it's a holiday weekend. And my 8th grade son said to me, okay, holiday. They didn't let you in that church because you were black. And I had to hold myself together for 3 hours to get my son back home. And, I can't remember now if we talked about it, but I tried to smooth it over because I didn't want him to be against Church of God of Prophecy or people that he would go to the youth camp with their children. But that was the reality that day. And in my ministry in South Carolina, I faced many of those kind of days. Some a little worse, some not as bad. But I never gave up. I never gave up. I just kept going. I think I've coined the phrase, people will never know the price that you pay to be who you are.
Hmm.
And I want to give others an opportunity. Valerie, I need you to speak up.
So I have many stories that I could share, some that are my personal stories, my brother's stories, my father's stories, my son's stories, my husband's stories. So there are many that I can share. The one I'm going to choose to share is relevant to the Church of God of Prophecy that I grew up in. And of course, I grew up in a local church that was predominantly black, but of course, we know the church in general is predominantly white. And I attended the Agape summer camp every summer and had attended for years. And I didn't see very many people that looked like me when I came to camp. In fact, usually the people who looked like me came to camp with me. And so I remember coming to that camp for years, being in the minority by a huge percentage, and never seeing a black camp counselor, a black director, no one in a position of authority or leadership ever looked like me in all the years I had attended this camp. I believe it was either my sophomore or junior year that I came to camp. And by that time, I was at the point where I really wasn't excited about coming to camp anymore. But I came to camp this particular year, a van full of us, and somebody ran out to the van. Somebody ran out to the van and said, "There's a black counselor in there." And I remember us jumping from that van and running into that cabin like someone had told us Jesus was there. And it was Sylvia who was the counselor. And we ran in that cabin. And I didn't realize how much emotion I had attached to this until I'm telling you this story. We ran into that cabin and we jumped into those beds and grabbed hold of our pillows and we were just so excited to be there. And then I remember someone coming through and said, y'all are going to have to break up. All of y'all can't be in this cabin together. And mind you, I had attended this camp many years before and had always been the only black girl in my cabin. And they said, you all gonna have to break up. They can't have all of y'all in here together. And I just remember all of us just like holding onto our pillows and holding on to our bed saying, we're not going to be the one to leave. We're not going to be the one to leave. Finally, they did get one of us to leave. And, it was like, why was it a problem that all of us were together when every other cabinet, all of the white girls, in every other cabinet, all of the white girls were together? And, there were many stories that I could tell from my camp experience, but that one in particular, I think was the first time when it was blatant in my face that we were different and that it was a problem if we were all congregated together.
It's not a question of whether we have ever experienced systematic racism. It's a definite yes for all of us because it's not something that we can control. That's something that's generationally passed down. But I did just want to clarify that systematic racism is something that we all have experienced and we don't have a choice in experiencing.
I'm 100% about a couple of these. I'm not sure all the way, but I think Well, I met TJ before me and him were ever attended camp. I was his counselor once. But I think the first time we went to camp, I think Devonte also went to camp with us, and Sister Sylvia was the director of camp then, right?
Possibly.
I believe that. Devonte, did I meet you at senior camp?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. Sweet. Yeah.
Well, I was never the director of senior camp.
No?
I could have been assisting Chucky as director.
You were my director.
The hire I got was junior camp that I directed.
Yeah, that's
several years.
Actually, no. Pastor Charles
but I was always
Jeff
at
White
senior
camp too. Yeah, I know.
Sylvia's been my director. I've worked for Sylvia. I think Devonte was my cabin leader once.
Nice.
I think so.
Yeah.
Reverend Keno, you are, I believe you're actually the only one on call who's not a part of the Church of God of Prophecy, but you're actually part of the AME Zion Church. Has your experience been much different, or?
So I haven't experienced any racism within the church because most we all black. So whenever you have a white person to come to church, it looks weird.
I still might come though.
Oh, you're more than welcome to come. But no, not in that regard.
Yeah.
But I have experienced some prejudice, and I can tell you a story where my family and I was at the Charlotte Premium Outlet, and we was looking for a bag for my wife, and we was at the Kate Spade store, and there was some folks that was following us. And to me, I wasn't even paying attention because my mind is, all right, let me see what this bag is. Does my wife like it? Is it going to fit me at our price point and all this stuff? And so when we left out, because my wife said she didn't like anything, when she left out, she's like, you noticed that lady was following us? I said, yeah, I did notice that. And funny enough, my children were too small to pay attention, but that was a little awkward and weird for us in that regard.
That's sad. But, Pastor Blake was able to, he's made it with us. Pastor Blake, we were all just discussing if anybody had any stories where they've faced racism or experienced systemic racism, and just giving everybody a chance to kind of tell their story. If you had anything you wanted to share?
I have experienced racism on a few different occasions, but one in particular that kind of sticks in my mind. I won't name the church organization for particular reasons, but I didn't grow up in the Church of God of Prophecy organization. I was a Baptist and then became non-denominational as I got older. And so when I came to the Church of God of Prophecy organization, I came to a church in a particular church in my hometown. And when I came in, I noticed that there weren't very many, if any, blacks or African Americans at all. And I went to shake an individual's hand that was in the church attending, and he literally rejected my handshake. And so from that situation, it let me know that there was still some issues, underlying issues there, even at that church, that hadn't been addressed. And so it kind of made me take a step back and look at the church organization from a different standpoint, and became very reluctant to even become a part of that the church organization.
Well, I'm glad you did. It's been an honor knowing Pastor Blake. He's actually been one of my pastors once when I lived in the Somerville area, and he's been a big blessing in my life. I really believe that there are others out there in the church or even outside the church who they want to do something, they want to say something, but we're not sure what the right thing to say or do is. Would anyone care to address that? Is there a right action or a right thing we can say? Or what should we be doing as individuals?
I don't necessarily know if there's a right thing for us to do, but I know the wrong thing for us to do is to stay quiet and allow our brothers and sisters to continue to suffer.
My thing is, I just think it's time for the church to acknowledge that we have messed up, and we've messed up royally.
Mm-hmm.
We have hurt a lot of people. We have offended a lot of people. My being one of them. I've just chosen to stick with the church. Josh, I remember my final year in senior camp as a camper. My little girlfriend for the week, was a little white girl. And there was one night she came out of the dorm crying, and I asked her what was wrong. And she says, my cabin leader and someone else just told me that God is not pleased with me being with you. Needless to say, as a camper, I never returned to the campground. It's time the church we need to acknowledge the fact that we have sinned. We have hurt people. We have lost good people from our organizations because of ignorance, because of racial prejudice. We can continue to talk, and it's a great thing that we are having a conversation. But, I'm hoping to gain from this or see from this, the system be changed, leadership be changed. If we're willing to take down statues that are offensive to people, we need to be willing to take down leaders that are offensive to people.
Amen.
And that's deep. That's heavy. It's true. I asked Sister Sylvia, and I went ahead and said, I'm going to go and kind of presuppose what some of our listeners or other people who maybe aren't already on board are kind of thinking. And so we want to address both sides. We want to address everything and really speak life to everyone. And we hope to seek understanding, not just for ourselves, but for those who maybe don't have as much understanding even as us. So one thing I've actually heard recently on the phone, that it's not an issue of racism, it's an issue of classism. It's the lower class gets treated that way, not necessarily, a certain race. If anybody wanted to address that, I saw Valerie had her hand up. I want to go ahead and let her speak if she wanted to say something.
So I originally wanted to address the first question, but now I want to address the second.
Do both. Go ahead.
Let me say a couple of things to the first because I have to. There's this big question of what do we do, right? So there is the things that have to be done on a macro level, and then there are things that have to be done on a micro level. And, I believe we all have to do is really personalize, not what can we do, the bigger society, because that is a part of the question. The church, yes, that's a part of the question. But every single person on this call, you have an individual personal responsibility in this. And I think sometimes when we talk about what can we do as a church, as an employer, as a society, it becomes so big that to some it becomes overwhelming to deal with, and to others, it's just that safe place to do nothing because it's so massive that you don't know where to start. It's like having that big project. I don't know if any of you ever watched this show Hoarders, and you see those houses, and there's just all this stuff, and it's just chaos, and it's just there's just junk, and it's like, well, where do they start? And I think sometimes when we view the problem as that big, it gives us an excuse to do nothing. A couple of things I want to share is, one, you have to stop looking for a quick fix. This didn't happen quickly. It's not going to be fixed quickly. Black people are not going to stop. I also need you to stop asking me how to fix it. I didn't do it. I didn't create it. And it's like when a person has lost a loved one or gone through some traumatic experience, and everyone calls and everyone says, well, let me know what I can do. Well, I'm the one in pain, and I oftentimes don't know what you can do. I don't necessarily know in the moment what I need. And so sometimes the question, there are those of us who feel like we need to give a quick response because we're the problem solvers, and then there's others who are irritated by the question. While I think the conversation has to continue, I think that question, being asked to Black people, how do we fix it? That's a question that I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear how do we fix it. I just want to continue the conversation. And then when asking how I experience racism, I like to pose the question back to the majority. How have you perpetrated racism? Because we always ask us our stories. And, we heard many of those stories on the call today in terms of, how we have been the subjects of racism. But we never hear from our white brothers and sisters, how did you perpetrate racism? And sometimes that is conscious and sometimes that is subconscious racism. But we don't hear those stories. We don't hear our counterparts saying, you know what, I remember when I did this and when I said that. And when I evaluate that, what I realized is I was perpetrating racism. The other question is, how have you benefited from it? Those are things that we don't talk about on an individual level. So what I would say on an individual level is challenge yourself to ask, where am I continuing to perpetrate racism? And when I see it happening, am I questioning it? Am I challenging it? Am I challenging my family members, my loved ones? Do I challenge it on my job? Let's give voice to it. Let's give voice to it outside of these conversations and begin to give voice to it in all of those other places that we walk. Whether it's in the church, whether it's on the job, if I'm in a leadership meeting at church and I see racism raising its ugly head, do I stand up in that meeting and say, no, this is not right. This is an example of racism continuing to exist here. So those are things that I think can be done on a micro level while we continue these conversations about addressing it on a macro level. And now in saying all of that, I forgot your second question.
I was talking about those who like to try and say that it's not necessarily a race issue, but a class issue. The lower class people are the ones who face police brutality, not necessarily a specific race.
So I think that's a way we tend to smooth over the issue. Yes, there are clearly class issues in this country. There's no doubt about it. However, there is still clearly a race issue. And if you're Black in a low socioeconomic status, it is a double, triple, and if you're male, it's a triple-edged sword.
Yes.
So yes, there's clearly a class issue, but there is no denying, even before a class issue, there's a race issue. Because even if you never know where I fall on the socioeconomic spectrum in this country, you clearly know I'm Black.
Yeah, and I guess kind of address my own question for those people. I actually read an article earlier today. David French, who's a very conservative reporter, who he adopted a young African American lady, or I think she was just African. I think she was Ethiopian, but he was talking about how he had two of his own biological children first, and then he had her, and the experience was wildly different for her, and how that changed his views on racism. And that I think that speaks to that question. Obviously, of his three daughters, two of them didn't have a different class than the third one, right? So I think that kind of speaks to that issue as well. While we're debunking things, I know this one's been kind of beat over the head. Does anyone want to address the All Lives Matter thing? People would like to respond to the Black Lives Matter with that?
Of course, all lives matter. Absolutely. No one's saying they don't. But that's not the issue right now. Like, if a loved one came up to you, like someone you knew, and said their father died, you probably wouldn't say, well, everyone's father dies. That's not what you do. That's not the kind of issue we're facing. It's like, yes, all lives matter. All lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter.
October we celebrate, we give recognition to breast cancer awareness. And you never hear anybody say, well, what about pancreatic cancer? What about lung cancer? That's important too. Nobody says that, but that statement is only made when it comes to Black Lives Matter. And I agree with my pastor friend that all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter.
Could you imagine if your house was on fire and you called 911 and the operator said, so what? My house has been on fire before. Mm-hmm. That doesn't help me right now. And that this would be the last me presuppositioning what other people say. I also heard someone actually recently tell me part of why they can't support the Black Lives Matter or hashtag Black Lives Matter or any of that is because they said it comes from the same people who started the Black Panthers.
So let's deal with one issue, and that is the Black Panthers were really focused on empowering and helping those in the community. One of the things that they did was they helped with food, they helped with after school care, and a lot of things that they took are now a part of the staple of what happens in the rest of the country. So there's like WIC came out of the Black Panther movement, after school care, those other things. And so for anybody to say, well, I can't support it because it's a part of the Black Panther, when in actuality, you can't support it because it makes you feel uncomfortable that the issues being raised about race and colorism. And so my challenge to anybody, especially who's a believer, Jesus said that you will know that you are my disciples by how you love one another. And if you love me, then you should be concerned about my well-being and my children's well-being. And the reality is that society as a whole is not concerned about African Americans' well-being because it doesn't matter until it transitions to the other side of the track. And so what you're seeing now is folks are feeling uncomfortable with something that's being portrayed that's been going on for black people since we've been a part of this country.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's sad, but police has been killing black men forever. We've been lynched, we've been brutalized, we've been demoralized. That this is nothing new for us. It's just now it's being filmed, like Will Smith said. And so what you're seeing is something that we've known growing up since generations. We heard stories. We always have experienced in some way, shape, form, or fashion. So to say that the Black Lives Matter is like the Black Panthers is what's really saying is that you don't care because for what you heard about the Black Panthers. Yes, they had guns. Yes, but they were trying to protect their own people. They were trying to protect their own people from the police because the police was coming in killing their own people, killing black people. And so they decided to take it upon themselves to protect because those who we said to protect and serve were not protecting and serving us. And so they decided to take it upon themselves. And this whole thing about Black Lives Matter is we're trying to make the issue known to the world that our voice is being squashed by people ignoring the value of who we are as human beings. We've been asking since the beginning of this country to treat us as human beings when in actuality we would never consider human beings from the get-go. So,
yeah, it's rough. And I think that hits the nail on the head. I wanted to get to the church stuff. A lot of people feel like the church has been too silent, and I think that's sort of what we're getting from all of you. And would you guys agree that the church has been too silent on the issues of Black Lives Matter?
Definitely.
What do you think the church should be saying? As you know, the bigger picture. I know Valerie asked. We don't ask individually what that is, right? Individual, the best action I could do is to turn to myself, ask myself, is what she said. I think I liked that and kind of see if I've been a part and kind of evaluate myself and deal with me. But on a bigger picture, what can the church do? What can the church be saying?
I like what Valerie said when she was talking about her experience. And Valerie brought up the fact that for years she went to camp and no person of color was in a decision-making position. No person of color. So the songs that were sung were not our songs, but we sang them. The activities that they had were not our activities. And a lot of us weren't even a part of the activities. A lot of things they did at camp, nothing was geared toward Black people. Things that the church needs to do is look at the staff, look at the people that's making decisions and say, are we fully representing the people that we minister to? Are we fully representing? We need people of color in decision-making positions. That's what I think the church needs to take a long, hard look at it.
Actually, I have one last question for the panel, and then we'll finish this up with Sister Sylvia. If God himself was speaking to you, and he said, hey, I'm going to make it happen. This one thing. The church will do this one thing to impact this movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. What would you have the one thing the church could do? What would you have it be?
In my other life as a prevention specialist, before we could put forth any program, after we came up with an idea, we had to have a focus group representing the people that were going to receive the service that we were going to offer. I had one person, and I'm old, so I'm gonna say this: why give me a churn if I already have sweet milk? I don't need a cow. I got sweet milk. That's what they used to call it. But anyway, so we would pull together a focus group, and we would ask the same kind of questions possibly that you're asking. How can we serve you better? So what do I feel the church could do? I think the simplest, the easiest thing is call together a focus group. And it may be several, because the opinions in the South are going to be different from the opinions in the North, South, East, or West. Come together. Let's have a conversation.
Josh, the church needs to become intentional about everything that they do moving forward, to diversify the leadership. It would be great to be able to look in the leadership office and see someone there who's representing me, who looks like me. It's just kind of hard to sell truth and holiness, and not to say that these men and women are not, I'm not questioning their walk with the Lord. But if you're asking me if there's something that I could whisper into their ear, they need to become intentional, have a purpose. Granddaddy can't lead the church today, to the son anymore. The son can't lead the church to the grandson anymore. And we've seen this handed down throughout churches. So if the church is serious about correcting this or helping to initiate change, then be intentional. Do it for a reason. Create opportunities for others to lead from a different perspective and a different angle. We can learn something from that.
It's a good word. It's a good word. And that's something we've said before, not necessarily just about leadership, but, about the individual church. We've said, if you're in a community that's 20% African American, your church should have that, right? Your church should reflect the community. And that's, I think the same thing's true of the leadership. It's a good word.
The church needs to respond to God's call and being more concerned about God's people. And not just saying it in just, I'll pray for you. But no, let's be the hands and feet of Jesus and do something about it. And so one of the things that the church can do is to help our brothers and sisters who live in food deserts. Let's push to have some healthy options for them to have, or poor schools. There's so much that the church could do as a whole, but she chooses not to because the people in it is comfortable to sit in the pew. Those individuals who are listening, if you really want to do something, then engage your community, engage your political leaders, and saying this is not good. Something has to change, and so the change has to come from us by speaking up and saying no longer will it. We as believers of Christ will stand for the injustices that happen to people of color.
Yeah, that's a good word. It's something said reminded me of something. You said, the church needs to go out to those who are in need, who are hurting. And I'm sure we've all seen the whole Black Lives Matter memes where it's Jesus leaving the 99 for the one, right? So this is the one in need. I want to go. I heard someone say, since when did the story say that Jesus verified that one sheep was really in need? So many people are, okay, but is this really a problem? Well, why does that matter? When in that story did Jesus say, does that sheep really need help? He just went.
I think what I would want the church, or I would assume the church would change, is not only be intentional about what they're doing, but also make sure that they're addressing a moral issue. We're just asking for the bare minimum. Like the what everybody else is getting. We're not asking for anything specific. So I think it's important that we look at the moral issue and challenge our community in general to check within ourselves, because I'm sure, like, on an individual level, we have things that we can work on individually to help this on a macro level. So bringing awareness, like Valerie was mentioning earlier, there's so many different things that the church can do, but just challenging ourselves morally, like, are we allowing something immoral to happen? What are our standards? Where do we stand? If the public has to ask where the church stands on topics like this, we have a bigger issue.
Change moves at the rate of relationships. If we're building these relationships and we're doing something as far as a personal, individual level in your relationships, that's where you'll see change. And I think that speaks a lot to this situation as well. Just kind of recap. So far, we've on individual levels, what we should be doing is kind of reflecting on ourselves, asking how we are impacting systematic racism, or have we been furthering it, or are we anti-racist? We've talked about how Sister Sylvia suggested having sort of a what you said, like a panel or for ideas to run through the church that everyone's represented. And Pastor Charles mentioned having more diverse leadership. These are all really good ideas.
I just want to say, just be aware of the history of our country, just so everybody has a better understanding of what Black people feel. Just have a good understanding of what we're referring to. So look up the things that our government has done to Black African Americans. So just be aware of what's going on.
Pastor Sylvia stated something. Well, someone made a reference to Pastor Sylvia. If she was the general overseer or general see what would happen. And people said there'll be a mass exodus and there'll be a lot of things going on. But I believe that if we're, as Pastor Staten said, the focus group, if this can be done through our leadership and really bring people to the table, what our leadership is going to have to brace themselves for is a exodus. Because there will be an exodus. Because no matter how you cut it, how you look at it, some people will never accept what we're trying to do, and never accept change. So we got to prepare ourselves for an exodus. Because when you bring people to the table, and you really, today this was a good conversation, but if you really want the conversation, that the conversation can get real ugly, and not being combative, but if people really want to know the truth hurts. And a lot of people don't like truth. So I'll say to our leadership, be prepared for folk to leave the church if you have this kind of conversation.
It's true. Jesus said, what was it? He said, I came to bring the sword. And sometimes that's what the truth does. Yeah.
It's not have we contributed to the problem, because we all have.
Exactly.
It's how have we. Even as a Black woman, even as Black people, we contribute to our own victimization, because when something is ingrained, or anyone who knows anything about abuse, once I had you under my control, I no longer have to perpetrate abuse. You are going to be under my control, whether I'm present or not.
Absolutely.
This has been so ingrained in the Black community that we help to maintain the status quo ourselves. And so, I have even begun to challenge some of my own thinking and some of the ways that I do things. I'll give you an example, is my hair. I have not worn my hair like this ever in my life, but this is my natural hair. And before this call today, and if I straighten my hair, this comes below my shoulders. And one of the things that I generally do, being the CEO of an organization, if I'm going into a meeting with execs or folks who are high up that chain on in terms of social economic status, I straighten my hair before I go to that meeting. And I thought about straightening my hair before getting on this call today. And I realized what I was doing was conforming and trying to be exactly who the system told me that I was.
Yes.
So this
Yes.
is not a question for white folks to say, how have
Yes.
perpetrated, but blacks to say, how have I helped to sustain racism in this country? We have adapted behaviors. We have conformed. We have said white schools are the best schools. We have said, you got to get your child in this place or that place. And we have made those determinations based on how black or how white they were, how rich or how poor the institution was. So this is not, when I say that we have to ask ourselves these questions is not just for white folks, it's for black folks as well. And in our everyday life, we have to challenge what we do, how we do it, and why we do it.
If there was one thing that I would add to everything that's been said, is the fact that the church needs to start with acceptance. Accepting the fact that there is an issue that we do and always have had some problems and issues, and that we need to receive that and then begin to look inwardly and address them as such. But it starts with acceptance and accepting the fact that yes, there is an issue, and yes, we do have a problem.
Josh, I would add, I think the conversation that's being had tonight is great, but there's a common denominator with a lot of the participants for the exception of two. That's the fact that we all look alike. We don't have a problem with each other. We have a problem with the system. I think moving forward, conversations need to be had. They have to be had, but at the same time, everyone needs to have a seat at the table. Those who are offending or who have been offended, we need to see each other. We need to hear each other and understand, why are we feeling this way towards one another. It's great that we are having this conversation, but again, if we're talking about change, then the deep conversation, the difficult conversation must be had. I think if only by way of suggestion, not mandate, Josh. I think you guys are doing it great. But if we're talking about changing systems, changing attitudes and behaviors, then there needs to be someone sitting across from me who does not look like me. I need to hear from him or her, and they need to hear from me.
I really hope this was sort of the baby step, right? Like the first step of, like they have that joke, I got a plan to plan. Well, this is like the first step to take a step. Like this is the conversation that needed to be had is that we need to have conversations. And hopefully this will help other people open up and be willing to do that. And we can see more men of action, more diversity in these conversations, and change to be had. And that's really our hope with this. Thank you all so much for joining us. It was great to meet those of you I haven't met before, and those of you I've known for a while. It's just good to see your faces again. And I appreciate all of you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you guys. So, Sister Sylvia, one last question for you before we kind of do a little bit of stuff for the outro. We ask the God moment and all that. But before, we wanted to also ask you, you've talked to me on the phone before about, basically things we shouldn't say, things that some people might not be aware of that aren't, good things to say. I'm trying to think of something you said. I know you told me to not say colored. I was like, okay, I actually didn't know that. I thought people of color was kind of the preferred term, and I learned that that's not the case. Are there any other phrases that people should avoid, basically?
Okay, I've got about 7.
Perfect.
7. Okay.
Let's hear it.
Okay, number 1. And I think we discussed this. Don't come to us saying all lives matter. We've discussed that. We're not. Yes, everybody's life matters, but at this juncture, we want Black lives to matter. Number 2, you are different than the others. We've heard black. I've heard white people say that to me. You're different than the others. Meaning, and you're either trying to divide me from my people or think I am so gullible that I'm putty in your hands. 3, I'm scared. I'm scared to get pulled over too. It's different with white people getting pulled over than us. Number 4, I kind of sent out a survey to some good friends of mine, and they responded with these statements. We are all discriminated against. We know that's not true. Number 5, I'm tired of apologizing for being white. We don't want an apology. It's okay. You can no longer apologize for being white than I can apologize for being black. I was raised in a predominantly black family, most of my growing up. So we don't need an apology. We don't like it when white men call black women gals. Come here, gal. That gal over there. Number 7, I have black. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just have a quick question because I hear people from stage do this where they're like, "All right, guys and gals, does that bother anybody?"
Well, gals to me makes me think of during slavery.
So should they just say guys and girls? Just better.
Well, men and women.
Yeah. Okay.
Men, women.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Number 7 is I have black friends too. And if you have to count your black friends, I thought about this. You might be a racist if.
Here we go.
If you have a number of black friends, I have black friends too. If you have to make that statement. And my last one is, this is just a statement. As we talk about having the conversation, most white people deny the fact that there is a problem. I ran into someone today that wanted to say, we've always gotten along. And I brought out to them, yeah, but you had black section, white section, black bathroom, white bathroom. Water fountains were black and white. And I came up with, I didn't develop the statement, but here's a statement. People love what you do as long as you do what you love. As long as you do what they love you. And I think we've been silent too long.
And I just want to throw out there for everybody, because we didn't have time to talk about it today, but there are a lot of arguments and things that are said hurtful one way or the other that maybe aren't necessarily racist, but they're not anti-racist. And on the other side, there's a lot of confusion with terms. These terms thrown out like just for example, I'm not saying that we agree or disagree with any of these. Just stuff like when people say white privilege, or when people say Black Lives Matter, or when people say systemic racism. A lot of people, they look at what that seems to mean to them face value, and they don't actually look up the terms. They don't actually know what those phrases mean. Exactly. Now, we don't have time to talk about it today, but I want to recommend to everybody that you look up some of these before you make any arguments about it and see what those terms are actually supposed to mean. And then if you have arguments, have the arguments, but make sure you know what you're talking about first, right?
Exactly.
So, Sister Sylvia, would saying, because I've heard a lot of people say the friends thing, but I've heard a lot of people say, well, my best friend is black. Mm-hmm. Is that the same as counting your friends, or is that different?
Well, I think just the fact that you have to clarify. And are you justifying? Mm-hmm. And what is the motive behind the statement that you're making?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So we're going to have to be more intentional about what we say. It may even mean we'll have to think.
Thank
It
you.
may
That's
mean
all
we'll
right.
have to care.
Yeah.
It may mean we'll have to love. If you ask me today, which one of your sons do you love the most? And my answer to that is always the one I'm talking.
Well, which one of your penguins do you love the most?
The one I'm talking to is the one that I love the most. And when I finish talking to him, then and start talking to another one, I love him the most.
Right. So, thank you so much. So, you've done this before. You know we like to end this with our God moment. This is no exception. We will be doing a God moment of the week or, however long. Josh, would you like to go first?
Yeah. God's been doing a lot with me recently. It's great. I love when God's working with me, especially when I don't know what He's working on. It's exciting. But last week I was doing dishes, and the manager, one of the managers, was doing dishes with me at work, and looked at me and asked, because she was playing her music, and was like, "Oh, I don't need to skip this, do I?" It was I forget which song it is. I think it was Waymaker. It was a Christian song, and she realized, "Oh, it's you. I don't have to skip Jesus songs." And I was like, "Oh no, please don't skip it." Actually, and we were just back there, kind of worshiping, doing dishes in the store. I don't really know that manager outside of work at all, and it was just it was a really cool worship moment. And then I'm still doing more at my work. Even today, I had a different coworker, for whatever reason, started asking me about the Bible, and we talked about Colossians my entire shift. I don't think I've ever talked about the book of Colossians that much, but
I don't think I've ever talked about the book of Colossians. Period.
Well, there's always a day to start. Call me after that.
No, I will not.
I'll go next. My God moment.
That's a good one. I'll go next. And if you will allow it, I'm gonna count this podcast. Most of my friends are my age. Their point of view is not that different from mine. So I don't get a lot of, conflicting points of view. This episode has been really, really nice. Because seeing people from all walks of life throughout the past, many years, not just when I've been alive, it has been really refreshing to hear what they have to say.
Amen.
Great.
Hey, Sister Sylvia, would you like to share anything God's been doing with you recently?
Well, the Lord has blessed me tremendously. I've moved in the past 2-3 months, and I've moved in a neighborhood where my neighbors don't necessarily look like me. My neighbor on my right knew of me before I came in. He knew I was a black woman. He knew I was a preacher. He told me what I was. But before I moved in, he decided he was going to build a fence. I think he's been here about 15 years. But he just all of a sudden decides he wants to build a fence. And one of my things for the year is I refuse to be offended. So he has a fence that I can't look over, which that could be almost any size fence if you really know who I am. My neighbor on the left has a fence. So God has blessed me now that I don't have to build a fence.
You don't.
Because my neighbors have blessed me with their fences, and the woods. I have woods in the back of my house, and so there's no need to have a fence there. So God will bless me in the midst of chaos. And I'm going to pick up every rock that's thrown at me and use it as a stepping stone. That's how God has blessed me.
All right. That's some kind of blessing.
That's great. We have one more segment for you, just for our patrons. Right after we do this outro, we're going to ask if you can summarize this whole podcast in 10 seconds. But first, could you wrap us up, please?
Right. So thank you guys for listening. Yeah, if you've made it this far, congratulations. I hope you've enjoyed it. And please consider supporting us on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you'll be able to hear what Sister Sylvia is about to say for us. You also get access to a bunch of other content that we produce and put on there.
The satisfaction of helping us. We need help.
Right. Again, please follow us on our social medias at The Whole Church. The Whole Church. If you have any feedback, you can let us know on there. You can email us at thewholechurch@gmail.com. Again,
and some future guests coming up too.
Yeah.
It's, let's see, I know Reverend Keno is actually going to be back for our 50th episode. We got a big celebration planned there. Really excited to have him back. We're going to have a few others. The actual, the General Presbyter, Tim Coulter, is going to be a part of that episode. I'm really excited for him. Father Jonathan of the Greek Orthodox Church here in Charlotte is going to talk to us about their beliefs on Genesis 3 and sin. So we're going to kind of see what they see and whether or not unity can be had. Can't wait to, ask that question and see where it goes. We got a lot of really special guests coming up, but of course, into season 1, TJ.
Right. At the end of season 1, we will, of course, have Francis Chan.
Yeah, he just doesn't know it yet. Thank you guys for listening. Keep listening if you want to hear the 10-second segment. That's starting